What's up everyone, and welcome to another Rust electrical tutorial. I'm Austin, and today we're going to be talking about the automatic sprinkler version 2 update. Now this is an update from my first automatic sprinkler video, and so if you haven't watched that yet, if this is your first time seeing any of this, it's very important that you watch that first, as this is just an update and I will not be covering the specifics of setting the on and off timer durations and how to determine those values and so forth. So if you haven't watched it yet, watch that before you watch this. All right, so today we're going to be talking about three updates here. One is the splitter problem, which we'll cover over there here in a moment. We're going to add a duration timer. That's a common question I get about this, to give you greater functionality over this. And then we're also going to cover how to add more pumps and sprinklers to the circuit, how to expand this so that you can add additional pumps for other uses. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to cover the splitter problem. And what this is that some players were experiencing issues where they would turn on the circuit and the timers, the on and off timers, were running together. They were running concurrently. They weren't alternating back and forth like they were supposed to. And so what it turned out, the primary problem was actually that, unlike what I said in the video, I originally said that, somewhere at some point in the video I said, you don't have to, it doesn't matter which of these power out 2 and power out 3s go as far as these two blockers and this off timer, because in theory it shouldn't matter. But it turned out, as a lot of things in Rust are, doesn't quite make sense, but it does matter. If you send these to the wrong ones, it creates this problem where they run concurrently for reasons only Rust understands. So in the video, my original video, I hooked this up where power out 3, and only because of routing reasons, just so it looked nice, ended up going to the first blocker over here, and power out 1, again, just because it looked nice, ended up by just chance going to the blocker over here. This center one was always going to the timer, and that works fine. And so what happened was, I did that, and I would start it, and there you go. It's alternating back and forth, doing exactly. I have these set to 1 second just for demonstration reasons, so it's easy for you to follow. But they would alternate just like they're supposed to, based on whatever settings you give them. And when the crops were done, there you go, boom, you're done. And so what some players were doing, rightfully so, since I said that it doesn't matter, they ended up, just by chance, hooking them up in a different way. In this case, hooking it up where this time power out 1 went to the blocker over here and power out 3 ended up over here, and some other variations, whatever. But the point is they would do this and then run the circuit, and as you can see, there we go, they are running concurrently. And then at this point they fixed each other. They won't even always do that. Sometimes they will just literally run together every time, all the time. And so this is definitely something glitchy with Rust, but there are, of course, as we've covered clearly, one way to fix this is to hook it up exactly the way I did in the first video, where power out 3 goes to this first blocker and power out 1 goes to this third, or the second blocker over here. And as long as you do that, it will always start and run concurrently. That's assuming something doesn't change and there's some update that breaks this. And so another thing you can do, and so I'm going to set this thing up. I don't want to do that one. I want to take these off. I'm going to set this back up where this is set up the way that doesn't work, even though it should, but it doesn't work. Let's test that, make sure it doesn't work. There they are. They're running together like they shouldn't. And so one thing you can do, I'm going to set this into, service mode, if you will, if you saw my first one. And I'm going to change this. Right now I have these set to 1 and 1. And I think it should be noted that this problem of them running concurrently together, in tandem with each other, it only happens if each timer is set to the same value. So if your build is like, 15 seconds here and anything other than 15 seconds here, so basically something where they do not equal each other, the durations are totally different, you won't have this problem anyway, and it doesn't matter what you do down here. This only happens when the timers are the same duration. And so one thing you can do to sort of future-proof yourself on this is, if what I've been doing, and I found works really well, is you can take the off timer, and I'm sure it doesn't matter which one you do, but if you create a decimal value, so I'm going to do the smallest one I can do, that you can do up to 6 decimal places in Rust. And so create a really, really small extra little bit of duration on this, and I'm going to hook this back up, and I'll turn this off now. I'm going to hook this back up and take it, out of service mode, if you will, and I'm gonna then run this. And what you'll see is they're gonna start concurrent. They're gonna start with the problem, but they're gonna quickly, in one cycle, fix themselves because I changed the duration such a little bit. So they start together, and there they go. Now they fixed each other. They fixed it. So if you have a situation where you do need them to be essentially equal, and that's the way you're gonna do it, you can either, you know, do what I did down here and make sure you wire this the way I did in the first video, or you can just set a very, very tiny decimal value on one of the timers so that they're not exactly equal. Setting a decimal value is probably the safest way, but you know, you could try it with this, wiring it the way I did in the first video, and if that ever breaks, you could add a decimal. So that should take care of that problem. All right, so the next thing we're gonna talk about is how to add a timer. And I've already added it to the circuit. This is the exact same circuit, again, from the first one. In this one, I've just added some color coding so that you can see that power out one, this, you know, purplish pink line is running to the third one. This one's running to the original, and this light blue one is running over here, just like I was showing you over there, but just to kind of highlight that this is the way that you need to hook these up. And so the only difference between this and, you know, the original here and what you saw over there is that I've added a timer, and I've literally added that timer actually in line with a switch. You could replace the switch, but it's nice to have a, you know, like a shut off that allows you to do maintenance or whatever. So if you don't want to do this, you could save yourself a, you know, a rust watt in your battery and take away that switch if you want. But all I did was add a timer. So I've added a timer in line with the power here going in, and that's it. These are currently set to 2 seconds and 2 seconds, just so that we can, you know, just for demonstration purposes, but this is the off timer, the on timer, and that's all I've done. So this I've set to, what, 12 seconds, so it'll cycle a few times. But if I run this, there you go, it's gonna delay for 2 seconds, and it's gonna run for 2 seconds, off for 2 seconds, and then on again for 2 seconds, just like it normally works just from the first video. And that's all it's gonna do. And once it is done, it will shut off. And this was the specific question, is that some players wanted to be able to, you know, set this whole thing up, get their crops ready, and then, you know, essentially fix it and forget it. I think specifically it was 5,400 seconds is what he wanted. Whatever it is, you can now just use this and set a total time for the circuit to run instead of having to turn it off once the crop has finished yourself. So it's a very, very simple add-on, but a very useful add-on and a very, very solid idea. So that's pretty much it. That's all you have to do for that. There's not much else. I mean, I think the original one was 17. You know, this is just my generic power sources, represents whatever you have. So whatever battery you're running this off of is what this represents. It was 17, I think, in the original video. So I just added one extra because I popped in a timer. So that is that. All right, so the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about pump and sprinkler expansion. This is actually also relatively simple, but I've had this question a couple of times, is, you know, how do I add an extra pump? Maybe you've got some setup where you've expanded the limits of how many sprinklers you can daisy chain, or, you know, whatever, you need another pump. And so the easiest way to do this, and it's actually not too bad, is I'm gonna take 2 splitters, and I'm gonna put 1 splitter down here. I'll explain this in a minute, and 1 splitter up here. And I'm going to just modify 2 of the lines on the pump. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the toggle and the power. So starting with the power, if you trace that back, we come back to this branch over here. This is the branch that powers this pump. And then same thing with the toggle. This is the toggle line that runs from the branch out of this branch. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove those lines, and we're going to just insert a splitter into that line. So, you know, from over here, I'm gonna just get up here and I'm going to drop a line down like it was before, very, very simple. And I'm gonna jump that up to this splitter here, which we could sort of unofficially think of as the power splitter, just like that. And then same thing over here, we're gonna take for the toggle output here, you know, for the toggle splitter, if you will. I'm gonna jumper that up way up here, and I'm gonna run that across and into this splitter there. And there we go, we've inserted that in. And then we're just gonna hook back up this original pump, very simple. So this I'm gonna just arbitrarily choose this power 3. I can't imagine these ones will matter like the other one. And I'm gonna run this over to the power in of this pump power. And so there we go. And then the same thing up here, I'm gonna jumper down this output here, doesn't matter which one, and I'm gonna jump that into the toggle. So reconnecting this pump as it was set up before. So now we have the same setup. All I've done is just inserted these splitters. And then all I have to do after this is add, we'll do say light blue. I just have to hook up this other pump to that same splitter. So from the power splitter down here, running off the power, I'm just gonna run a jumper line up here to this pump up here like this to the power. Make sure you go into the pump power from that splitter. And then same thing with this splitter here. I'm just gonna jumper that down over and into this line, and we're gonna run that up here. And same thing, that's just gonna run over here, and just make sure that runs into the toggle of that pump. And as far as modifying the circuit, that's all you have to do. Insert a splitter and reconnect your old pump, and then hook up your new pump. Just being careful that you know, do the right one off of the correct splitter. So the last thing you have to do once you've done that is you have to do a slight bit of power management, because we've added new components to this circuit that are not accounted for currently with the power supply of 18 that we're sending it. So we're gonna have to just do a quick little power management. And you know, these branches are set to 2 because that's the default value. So they were, prior to any of this, technically overpowering the pump and the toggle anyway. So we only need to add 1 extra unit of power because there was already a surplus of 1 there, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna set each one of these up 1. So, and that's really, before I do this, that's the trick, is that for every pump you add, once you've done this, and unless you start adding more splitters, this changes, but for up to 2 pumps anyway, all you have to do is add 1 to every single one of these branches. For every pump you add 1 pump, add 1 to each one. So this one becomes 3, and you can trace that out because you want 3 arriving, 3 coming out of here, 3 arriving. It uses 1, 2 left over to power the 2 toggles. Same thing down here. We have 2. We want to set that to 3 because we want 3 arriving here. It uses 1. We have 2 left over to power the 2 pumps. And then this one needs to be added to as well, not because it's actually adding an extra volt to the system. It's just that this is a distribution branch where, you know, I need, originally it was set to 5 going this way, but I've added 1, so I gotta kind of take an extra 1 and send it that way, if that makes sense. So you're only actually adding power to these. This one just gets bumped up just so it redistributes the power into the correct path. And so once I've done that, now I have to just adjust this primary branch up here to reflect what I've added. And since I added 1 unit of power coming out of here and 1 extra unit of power coming out of here, that's 2 extra units of power. You just add that to here. So this becomes 20. And so you'll notice, and I do this a lot when I do these videos, is that I tend to add things up and backtrack toward the power source. That's just kind of a useful trick. Instead of coming here and trying to forward think about all these things you've done, it's often easier just, and you know, you do you, but I find that it's often easier to just think about it in terms of adding it up in the circuit and then going back to your battery and its main branch and saying, well, this is what I need now based on what I've done. So I've done that. And then technically at this point, we're ready to go. If you were to say, well, I'm going to hook up a 3rd pump off of here, you know, or a power off of here, toggled off of here, you could do that. You would just then make this 4 now. You'd make this 4, you'd make this 7, you bump everything up 1, and now you have another unit of power here and another unit of power here, total of 2, so 4. But you know, 2 from the last time. We started at 18, we added 2, now we're adding 2 more. It'd be 22 if we added another 2 pumps. So it's very, very simple. You don't have to, you know, overthink it. You can just add 1 to each one every time you do this up to the first one. And so that's it. So at this point, these are set to 2 seconds and 2 seconds. If I were to run this, it's going to delay for 2 seconds. It's going to run for 2 seconds. You'll notice they're both running and they're both turning off. And so it'll just do that for the duration of the timer, which we just discussed. In this case, it's set to 12 seconds. It'll run 3 times. And there you go. And that's it. So that, folks, is just about all I've got. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. Otherwise, you can get me on my Discord. See you later.